What's up, house parties? How are we doing? So glad that you're at a house. So glad that you're on a couch. So glad hopefully you have a snack and you're just hanging out. Hey, listen, Easter is a week and a half away, and maybe you've already seen some stuff about Easter at Christ Church Camden. Maybe you've seen the billboard. Maybe you've seen a Sit With Me card. Hey, whatever it would be, we would love to have you and your family join us for Easter at Christ Church. We'd love to have you as a student sign up to serve in some kind of way. Help make Easter happen. Whatever it may look like, we want chaos to be a part of Easter here at Christ Church, and I think that you should definitely take that step. And I think you can do all that through our website, so go check that out. Anyway, I hope you are ready to talk more about who God is. We're now in week 2 of this series, God Is. And last week we talked about the A.W. Tozer quote, where he says, "What comes to mind when you think about God is the most important thing. Who we believe God to be will shape who we are." And honestly, a lot of people have the complete wrong view of who God is, and that shapes them into something totally different than what God designed them to be. So we are going to look at God's word to find out more about who he really is. And our journey has to start here because seeing God for who he really is allows us to see everyone and everything for what they really are. And we're looking at the names of God used in the Bible because back then your name wasn't just like something that sounded cool so people called you that. Your name said something about who you were. It defined you. Last week we looked at how God is called Emmanuel, which means God with us, and we saw how God is called Abba or Dad. These two names tell us that God is close. He's loving and kind. He isn't some distant old God like floating on the clouds. He's close. He wants what's best for us like any loving dad would. So let's take a look at 2 more names for God this week and see even more about who God really is. The next name we're looking at is Jehovah Rapha. That means God is our healer. We talked about this at Rush, but Jehovah is just God's name. It could be translated into Yahweh. This name is originally written in Hebrew, and the language is a little wild when you translate it. There's like no vowels. It's all kind of crazy. So it's 2 different names for us, but it's the same one in the Bible. And Rapha means to mend, to heal, to repair, to stitch together, to make whole. We first see God heal in Genesis chapter 20. We see someone pray and God heals his wife and many other people. We see God say this a lot with Israel, his people, all throughout the Old Testament. Israel continues to disobey God, and when they do that, things go bad pretty quick. They're like constantly hurting, constantly being taken over by enemy nations. And God continues to heal and restore. Like he does that a lot. David in the Old Testament knows God like this. He said in Psalm 103, he forgives all my sins, he heals all my diseases. I don't think he was just talking about like physical. We see healing when Jesus arrives in the New Testament. Jesus enters a world, a hurting and broken world, a sick world, and he says he's here to heal, to restore, and to fix. At one point, the Pharisees are actually like judging Jesus for hanging out with a bunch of messed up people, like sketchy people, like people who if they sat down next to you at a restaurant, you'd like slide over a booth, you know what I mean? And when Jesus responds to them, he basically tells them off saying, hey, healthy people don't need a doctor. Healthy people don't need to be healed. Sick people do, and Jesus came to bring healing. That's who God is. He's a healer. He restores, he mends, he picks up the broken pieces of our life and he heals and he mends them together. All right, the next name we're looking at is Jehovah Jireh. You probably have heard that song, Jireh by Maverick City. I blessed house parties last week with my beautiful singing voice. I'm going to hold off on doing that again this week. But that whole song is about how we aren't in need of anything because we have God, that he is enough, that he will provide. And that's what that name means. God is our provider. This name originates from this crazy story in the book of Genesis. In chapter 22, we're following this guy named Abraham. And God's going to use Abraham to make his people, like Israel, to make this whole nation. And it takes a while, but Abraham finally has a son named Isaac. And in this story, in chapter 22, we see God tell Abraham to take his son Isaac on a mountain and sacrifice him, which is wild. It's crazy. I mean, like, why would God do that? And as we read on, we see that God's plan was never really to have Abraham kill his own son, but we see God was walking Abraham through something to get him to obey and to deepen his love and his commitment to God. And at the end of that passage, after God stops Abraham, they're all like, hey, what should we sacrifice? Like, what could we do? And God provided exactly what was needed at exactly the right time. Then Abraham names this place God will provide, or Jehovah Jireh. He named it so that as people pass by, the story of how God provided in his time of need would continue to be told. This is such a great picture of how God provided Jesus at just the right time. God is a provider. He knows what we need. He knows when we need it, and he gives it to us. We are never in need. We may not understand. We may actually think differently, honestly, but the truth is God knows, God sees, and God provides. So if God is a healer and if God is a provider, what does that tell us about him? If he heals, that means we know he cares about the sick. He cares about the hurting. It means he wants to fix and repair what's broken. We know he loves. We know he has the power and the strength to heal. He is able to heal. If he provides, that means he has the power and the strength to give what we need. It means he sees us. He knows when we are in need and what we need. It means he knows us. It means he understands what we are going through. And he loves and he cares enough to give us what we need. And he's wise enough to give it at the right time. He sees and he cares about our brokenness and our sickness, and he's able to heal and put it back together. He sees and he cares about our needs, and he's able to give us what we need. That's who God is.